He thought divorce was the end of me. He thought I'd walk away broken. But what he didn't know was that this courtroom would be the stage for his greatest humiliation and my sweetest revenge. The pen scraped across the paper. My husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, sat at the table with a smug smile plastered on his face. He didn't just smile. He laughed softly as he signed the divorce papers, like this was all some kind of joke. I sat across from him, my hands clasped tightly together, hiding the tremble in my fingers. The room was cold, but my face burned with a mix of anger and humiliation. I'd spent years with this man, years of sacrifice. And now, watching him smirk while throwing it all away, it cut deep. "You're really making this too easy," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for me to hear. His eyes flicked up, locking with mine. "You should have fought harder to keep me. But hey, your loss." I bit my tongue. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not now. The judge cleared his throat, his voice calm, professional. "Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, today we finalize your divorce proceedings. Both parties have agreed to a settlement. But before we proceed, there are financial disclosures that must be reviewed." My husband leaned back in his chair, confidence radiating off him. He thought he knew everything. He thought he was leaving with the upper hand. He believed I had nothing, that I'd walk out of this courtroom with scraps while he moved on to his shiny new life. His new girlfriend sat in the back row, crossing her legs, smirking like she had already won too. She was half my age, with bright red lipstick and an expression that screamed victory. My stomach turned, but I stayed still. Calm. Silent. Inside, though, my heart pounded. He thought he was in control. He thought this was his victory lap. But he was wrong. The judge shuffled through the papers. "Mr. Reynolds, before we continue, I must remind you that financial transparency is required by law. Are you confident all your documents are in order?" My husband chuckled. "Of course, Your Honor. Everything is clean. I've been the breadwinner since day one. She didn't contribute much, let's just say that." He tilted his head toward me, mocking me in front of the entire courtroom. "She should be grateful I'm even agreeing to a settlement. Without me, she'd have nothing." The words stung, but I kept my face blank. On the inside, though, I repeated those words to myself like fuel. Without me, she'd have nothing. If only he knew. The judge adjusted his glasses, flipping to another page. "Mrs. Reynolds, I see your financial disclosures are sealed until now, at your request. Do you confirm that?" I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." My husband frowned, his smirk faltering just slightly. He hadn't expected that. He hadn't bothered to pay attention to the details because he was so sure I was powerless. The judge continued, his voice steady. "Very well. We'll review both parties' financial status before determining the settlement terms." My husband leaned forward, grinning again. "This won't take long. She never made real money. I handled everything. She'll walk away with whatever crumbs the court decides. No surprise there." His arrogance filled the room like poison. Every word he spoke was meant to crush me, to remind me that in his eyes, I was nothing more than a shadow in his life, someone who depended on him for every little thing. But he was about to learn the truth. The judge tapped his pen on the papers in front of him. "Mr. Reynolds, according to your documents, your declared assets and net worth total approximately $200,000. Do you confirm this?" "Yes, sir," he said proudly, almost puffing out his chest. "All earned through my hard work. She had nothing to do with it." I watched him. That smirk. That condescending tone. He was convinced this was already over. The judge turned the page slowly, his eyes scanning my sealed documents. My husband leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms like a king waiting for his crown. But I sat up straighter. My pulse quickened. The moment I had been waiting for was finally here. The judge cleared his throat again. "Now, Mrs. Reynolds." All eyes turned to me. My husband's smirk widened. His girlfriend even leaned forward, ready to watch me shrink under the weight of numbers that would surely prove his superiority. But the judge's next words would shatter that illusion forever. He glanced down at the paper, then back up at the courtroom. "According to Mrs. Reynolds' disclosures, her net worth stands at..." And in that moment, the laughter died in my husband's throat. The judge's voice faded for a moment, drowned out by the pounding of my heart. Everyone waited for the number, but before that truth hit the air, my mind slipped back in time, to the years that brought me here. I remembered the first time I met Daniel. He was charming then, confident, ambitious, the kind of man who could fill a room just by walking into it. I was fresh out of college, working my first job full of hope. He told me he saw potential in me, that I was special. And I believed him. In the early days, everything felt like a dream. He took me on expensive dates, whispered promises of a future filled with love and success. My friends warned me that he seemed too controlling, too focused on appearances, but I ignored them. Love makes you blind. When we got married, I gave up opportunities for him. I had been offered a position in a big firm, one that could have set me up for a career of my own. But Daniel didn't want that. "Why stress yourself out with work?" he said. "I'll take care of us. You can relax, support me, and maybe start a family. Isn't that what you want?" At first, I convinced myself it was love, that sacrificing my career for his comfort was the right choice, that being the perfect wife meant being silent, smiling, and making sure his shirts were ironed while he climbed the corporate ladder. But years went by and the cracks grew. Daniel became cruel in small ways at first, dismissing my opinions, mocking my ideas, telling people at dinner parties that I didn't really understand money, or that I was just a housewife. He laughed while saying it, but the laughter wasn't kind, it was sharp, humiliating. And when he got his promotion, when the money started flowing, he changed even more. He spent carelessly, bragged constantly, and reminded me at every turn that it was his money. One night, after he stumbled and drunk from another work party, I asked him why he never acknowledged what I gave up for him. He sneered. "You, please. You'd be nothing without me. You're lucky I married you. Do you think anyone else would have put up with you?" Those words lodged deep in my chest. They replayed over and over for years. You'd be nothing without me. And maybe that's when the shift began. I realized I couldn't trust him. I couldn't rely on him. So quietly, silently, I started making moves of my own. It began small. I sold old jewelry he never noticed. I started writing freelance work online while he thought I was just browsing the internet. I saved every penny I could, tucking it away into accounts he didn't know existed. Then I started learning. Late nights, while he snored in bed, I read books about investing, watched tutorials, and joined online forums. At first, it was just curiosity. Then it became survival. I invested in small stocks. Failed a few times. Learned from the mistakes. Then I moved into real estate with a little property I inherited from my grandmother. I rented it out. The money grew. Slowly at first, but steady. Daniel never noticed. He was too busy flaunting his success, too obsessed with the idea that he was the provider. He thought I was invisible, unimportant. That blindness became my weapon. Years passed. He cheated. He lied. He became colder, more arrogant. I pretended not to see. I played the obedient wife in public, but behind the mask, I built an empire. One quiet dollar at a time. And then came the final betrayal. I found a text message on his phone one morning. He hadn't even bothered to hide it. His new girlfriend, the one sitting smugly in the back of the courtroom now, was sending him photos, calling me pathetic, telling him she couldn't wait until he was free of me. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just laughed. "You can't leave me," he said. "Where would you go? What would you do? You have nothing, and you'll always have nothing. You need me more than I need you." That was the last straw. From that moment, I knew. I wouldn't just leave him. I would destroy him. And that's why I was here, sitting in this courtroom, watching him laugh as he signed those papers. He thought he was in control. He thought I had no cards to play. But he was about to learn that the woman he underestimated all these years was the same woman who had been building a fortune right under his nose. The judge's voice snapped me back to the present. My heart slammed against my ribs as he looked down at the paper. In review of Mrs. Reynolds' disclosures, the judge said slowly, his tone shifting, growing heavier with each word. Daniel leaned forward, smirk still plastered on his face. His girlfriend tilted her head, already savoring the moment. The judge adjusted his glasses. Her net worth stands at. The number rolled off his tongue like a thunderclap. And in that instant, Daniel's grin froze. His pen slipped from his hand and clattered onto the table. His girlfriend's smirk vanished. The courtroom air shifted, thick with shock. The courtroom gasped. A murmur rippled through the benches as the number hung in the air. It was more than anyone had expected. Far more. Daniel's jaw dropped, his smug expression cracking into disbelief. He turned to me, eyes wide, like he was seeing me for the first time. His lips parted, but no sound came out. I sat perfectly still. Calm. My heart raced inside my chest, but on the outside, I looked collected. Powerful. That silence, the silence of control, was sweeter than anything I had ever tasted. The judge cleared his throat. Mrs. Reynolds' net worth stands at. He repeated the number, slower this time, almost as if to confirm it himself. $12.4 million. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. That's impossible. She doesn't have that kind of money. She never worked a day in her life. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Reynolds, I'd advise you to calm down. According to the documents, Mrs. Reynolds has legally acquired and disclosed all assets. These include real estate holdings, investments, and liquid savings. All are verified. I let the moment sink in. His words, his laughter, his arrogance, every insult he had ever thrown at me, collapsed under that number. But the truth was, this wasn't luck. It wasn't some miracle. It was years of planning, years of being underestimated, years of turning his cruelty into fuel. It started with real estate. My grandmother's small property had been my lifeline. Daniel wanted to sell it off quickly for spending money, but I insisted on keeping it. It has sentimental value, I told him. He scoffed, rolled his eyes, and dismissed me. That property became my first rental. The income wasn't much at first, but it gave me breathing room. It gave me independence. While Daniel spent thousands on parties, cars, and gifts for women who weren't me, I quietly funneled money into investments. At night, while he boasted to friends about his genius in business, I studied financial markets. I watched, I learned, I made mistakes, small ones, hidden ones, but I never stopped. When cryptocurrency made headlines, I dipped in cautiously, buying early while Daniel laughed at those nerds throwing money at fake coins. By the time he even knew what Bitcoin was, I had already tripled my investment. Then I scaled up. Real estate became my anchor. I bought more properties, modest at first, then bigger, smarter deals. I renovated, rented, sold at the right time. My portfolio grew. Daniel never asked questions. He assumed every dollar in our lives came from him. His ego blinded him, and I used that blindness like a shield. Even when I opened my own consulting business under a different name, he didn't notice. I built a network of clients, managing small business finances, helping them grow. The work was quiet, online, under the radar. Every success, every deal, every dollar, I kept hidden. I still remember the night he walked into the living room, finding me typing furiously on my laptop. "What are you doing?" he asked, holding a glass of whiskey. I clicked the screen off and smiled. "Just looking up recipes." He chuckled and shook his head. "Figures. As long as dinner's good, right?" Then he wandered off, never asking again. If he had looked closer, he would have seen I wasn't some helpless wife glued to cooking blogs. He would have seen contracts, spreadsheets, and dollar signs. But Daniel never looked closer. He never saw me. And that was his greatest mistake. The more he ignored me, the more I grew. Every cruel word he threw my way only pushed me harder. Every time he laughed at me, I invested smarter. Every time he called me worthless, I added another zero to my accounts. By the time he started openly flaunting his girlfriend, I wasn't devastated. I was ready. I had prepared for this. For years, I had been waiting for the moment when I could step out of the shadow he forced me into and let the light hit him instead. Now, sitting in this courtroom, that moment had finally arrived. Daniel's face turned red, his voice rising. "She's lying. She doesn't have that money. This is fraud." The judge shook his head. "All documents are verified. Independent auditors have confirmed her holdings. Mrs. Reynolds has complied fully with the law." His girlfriend shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her smug grin gone. She glanced at Daniel, whispering something, but he shoved her hand away. His confidence was unraveling in front of everyone. I leaned forward just slightly, enough for only him to hear. "You should have paid more attention, Daniel." His eyes darted to me, filled with rage but also fear. Real fear. For the first time, the power was mine. The judge continued reading. "Given Mrs. Reynolds' financial standing, the court will now consider asset division under these circumstances. Mr. Reynolds, do you have any further comments?" Daniel stammered. This doesn't make sense. She was supposed to have nothing." The judge sighed. "Clearly, that is not the case." The courtroom was silent again, every eye locked on him. His kingdom of arrogance was crumbling. The man who believed he held all the cards now realized he had been holding nothing but air. And this was only the beginning. The silence in the courtroom was thick, broken only by the sound of Daniel's heavy breathing. His face was flushed red, his jaw clenched tight. He looked like a man who had just watched his house burn down, yet still refused to believe the flames were real. "This isn't fair," he finally shouted, slamming his hand against the table again. She tricked me. She hid money from me. This is fraud, Your Honor. The judge fixed him with a stern gaze. Mr. Reynolds, control yourself. These proceedings will continue with order. Daniel's lawyer leaned toward him, whispering urgently, trying to calm him down. But Daniel shoved him away. He couldn't stand the humiliation. Not here. Not in front of me. Not in front of his girlfriend, who now looked like she wished she had stayed home. I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap. My heart was steady now. The trembling was gone. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one shrinking under his voice. He was. Your Honor, Daniel snapped, his tone dripping with desperation. I demand a full investigation into her finances. She's lying. There's no way she made that kind of money. She never worked, never contributed. That's enough, the judge interrupted sharply. His gavel struck once. The sound echoed through the room. Mrs. Reynolds' finances have been verified. All her assets are legally documented. There is no fraud here. You will not disrespect this court with baseless accusations. Daniel's mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked around wildly, as if hoping someone else would come to his defense. No one did. Not his lawyer. Not the audience. Not even the girlfriend who now sat stiffly, her arms crossed, glaring at him. The judge leaned forward. Now regarding asset division. Considering Mrs. Reynolds' net worth and Mr. Reynolds' financial standing, the court will determine a fair settlement. However, he paused, scanning the papers again. Since Mrs. Reynolds' wealth is self-acquired, and there is no evidence of Mr. Reynolds' contribution, the settlement will be adjusted accordingly. I almost smiled. Almost. Daniel's head snapped toward me. His eyes were wild. This is your game, isn't it? He hissed under his breath. You planned this. You wanted to humiliate me. I met his gaze, calm and steady. No, Daniel. You did that to yourself. He recoiled like I had slapped him. The judge began outlining the division of assets, but Daniel wasn't listening. He couldn't hear anything over the sound of his own ego shattering. For years, he had called me useless. For years, he had mocked me, controlled me, cheated on me. And now, in the very place he thought he would win, he was being stripped bare. I remembered all those nights when he came home late, reeking of alcohol and perfume that wasn't mine. How he laughed when I confronted him. You're lucky I don't leave you, he would say. Without me, you'd starve. You're nothing. Just a leech. Those words had haunted me. But now, as I watched his arrogance unravel, I realized those words had become my greatest weapon. Every insult, every cruelty, it had driven me to build something bigger than he could ever imagine. And now he was choking on it. The judge's voice broke through my thoughts. Mr. Reynolds, given the disparity in financial standing and your lack of contribution to Mrs. Reynolds' assets, the court sees no grounds for awarding you any portion of her net worth. Your financial disclosure stands at $200,000. That will remain solely in your possession. The words hit him like a hammer. His face went pale. No, he whispered. No, that's not possible. She owes me. I gave her everything. I made her who she is. The judge's gavel struck again. Enough. This court will not entertain delusions. The decision is final. The room erupted in murmurs again. Reporters scribbled notes. A few spectators whispered, shaking their heads at the sight of the once arrogant man now crumbling in front of them. Daniel turned to me, his voice low, venomous. You think this is over? You think you've won? You'll regret this. I'll make sure you regret this. I leaned forward, my voice steady, sharp. No, Daniel. The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. His eyes burned with rage, but there was fear there too. Real fear. The kind of fear that comes when a man realizes the power he thought he had was never real at all. His girlfriend suddenly stood up, her heels clicking against the floor as she stormed out of the courtroom. She didn't even look back at him. The door slammed shut behind her. Daniel watched her go, his face crumpling further. He had lost everything, his pride, his control, even the woman he thought would stand beside him in his moment of triumph. But this was only the beginning of his downfall. Because while the court had spoken, my revenge wasn't finished yet. The air in the courtroom was heavy, every eye glued to Daniel as his world unraveled. His face was twisted with rage, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. He looked like a man trying to hold water in his hands, futile, pathetic, desperate. The judge adjusted his glasses, his voice calm, steady, merciless. Mr. Reynolds, this court finds no grounds to award you a share of Mrs. Reynolds' assets. In fact, Given your conduct, lack of contribution, and your financial disclosures, you will not be receiving alimony either." The words struck like lightning. Daniel's mouth fell open. He blinked rapidly, shaking his head as if trying to wake up from a nightmare. "No alimony? That's impossible. She owes me. She can't just walk away with all of this." The judge leaned forward. "You seem to misunderstand. Mrs. Reynolds does not owe you anything. Quite the opposite. She has been self-sufficient, discreet, and responsible. You, on the other hand, have mismanaged your resources, misrepresented your household role, and," he paused, his eyes narrowing at the papers in front of him, "attempted to conceal certain personal expenditures from your disclosure." A ripple of whispers ran through the courtroom. My lips curled into the faintest smile. I had seen the documents. I knew about his hidden credit card bills, the luxury dinners, the hotel stays. He thought he had covered his tracks, but the truth has a way of crawling out from under the dirt. Daniel's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Your Honor, if I may." "No," the judge cut in sharply. "You may not. The evidence is here. Mr. Reynolds, you not only stand to lose any claim against your wife's assets, but you may also face further investigation for financial dishonesty during these proceedings." Daniel's face drained of all color. "Investigation?" His voice cracked, high-pitched, panicked. The judge nodded firmly. "Lying in a financial disclosure to the court is a serious offense. We will be forwarding the documents to the proper authorities for review." The spectators gasped. Someone actually chuckled from the back row. The sound of Daniel's fall was music to their ears. I looked at him, really looked at him, as he sat there broken. This was the man who once told me I would starve without him. The man who mocked me, controlled me, made me feel small. And now, in front of everyone, he was the one shrinking. He slammed his fist down again, eyes wild. "This is a setup. She planned this. She tricked me into marriage, into everything." Finally, I spoke. My voice was soft but clear, every word sharp as glass. "No, Daniel. I didn't trick you. I believed in you. I gave up everything for you. You were the one who betrayed me. You made me into nothing. And while you laughed, I rebuilt myself. Quietly, patiently, until now." The courtroom was silent. Every head turned toward me, every ear straining to catch my words. Daniel sneered, though his voice wavered. "You'll regret this. You'll regret embarrassing me like this." I tilted my head calm. "The only one embarrassed here is you." His lawyer buried his face in his hands. His girlfriend was gone. His support was gone. Even his arrogance was cracking, piece by piece, in front of strangers who would leave this room and whisper about him for weeks, months, maybe years. The judge tapped his gavel once, restoring order. "This matter is settled. Divorce finalized. Assets remain separate. Mr. Reynolds, your claims are dismissed." Daniel slumped back in his chair, defeated. For a moment, he looked much smaller than I remembered, like a balloon that had finally lost all its air. But I wasn't finished watching him unravel. Not yet. The judge cleared his throat one final time. "Before we adjourn, Mrs. Reynolds, given the strength of your financial disclosures and the evidence of your independence, I am inclined to commend your diligence. It is rare to see such responsibility, especially under such circumstances." My chest swelled just a little. Not because I needed the praise, but because Daniel was forced to sit there and hear it. The same man who told me I was useless now had to listen to a judge commend me for my success. The courtroom began to empty, whispers swirling like smoke. People glanced at me, some with admiration, some with curiosity. But all eyes lingered on Daniel, the man who thought he held all the power and left with nothing but shame. He turned to me one last time, his eyes blazing. "This isn't over. You'll pay for this. One way or another, you'll pay." I stood, smoothing my jacket, my voice steady as stone. "No, Daniel. You already paid. You just didn't realize it until now." And with that, I walked out of the courtroom, leaving him to drown in the ruins of his pride. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of my revenge. Not yet. The judge had spoken. The room emptied. Cameras clicked. People whispered as they left. Daniel stayed behind, stunned, like a man whose map had suddenly disappeared. He looked at me with something like hate, and something worse, panic. Outside the courtroom, the hallway buzzed with reporters and lawyers. I kept my head down. I moved slow. Daniel's voice followed me like a bad smell. "You think this is over?" he spat as I passed. "This is just the start. I'll sue you. I'll ruin you. You'll see." I didn't answer. Words from him were cheap and hollow now. I had learned long ago that threats from a broken man meant nothing. Actions mattered. Evidence mattered. Time mattered. That night I went home alone. The house felt different. Lighter. No more his shoes by the door. No perfume in the air that did not belong to me. I made tea and sat at the table where he once sat and laughed. I let the silence soak in. I had planned for this moment for years. Not because I enjoyed planning, but because survival needs a plan. While he spent money like it grew on trees, I saved proof. Receipts. Emails. Screenshots. Contracts. A paper trail that stretched back years. I had copies of bank transfers he could not explain. I had his credit card statements showing charges at hotels and restaurants he insisted were business expenses. I had everything the court would need, and more. When the judge hinted at an investigation, I did not panic. I had already reached out to the right people. I had given evidence to the court. I had also sent a detailed packet to a firm that handled corporate fraud. They had flagged patterns in his spending and his business claims. They had opened a file. They had begun to ask questions. 2 days later, my phone rang at dawn. I answered on the third ring. "This is Detective Farouk," a man said, calm and precise. "We'd like to ask you some questions about Mr. Daniel Reynolds' financial records." I told the truth. I handed over the documents. I spoke plainly. I did not cry. I did not beg. I gave them names, dates, copies of messages, proof of payments he tried to hide. I told them about loans he took in my name, about signatures forged on a line I never signed, about expenses he called joint investments that never existed. Detective Farouk listened. He thanked me. He did not promise anything. He did say something that warmed me like a small fire. "You did the right thing. We'll look into it." By the time the week ended, the first knock came at Daniel's door. It was late when 2 officers in plain coats stepped into his study. They had papers. He stumbled like a sleepwalker. For a moment I watched from the window across the street as he tried to explain. His voice was small. I did not need to hear the rest. The next morning, 3 men in suits walked into the office where he worked. He was escorted out in handcuffs. News vans showed up. His picture splashed across the evening feed. The same man who once laughed at me for being nothing was now the face of a scandal. He lost his job the same day. The company where he had bragged about being the star let him go quietly at first, then with lights that made his name scream on every headline. Clients pulled out. Partners distanced themselves. The offers he once used to inflate himself vanished like smoke. He tried to fight back with lawyers. He sent angry letters. He called me obscene names on the phone. He begged me in private messages for mercy, for a deal, for anything that might save him. I ignored the calls. I blocked the numbers. I threw away the messages unread. People asked if I felt guilty. They asked if it was right to watch a man fall so hard. I thought about the nights he told me I owed him, about the times he hit where I was soft, about the way he smiled at other women and called it my fault. No guilt came, only a quiet relief. Then, a week later, a letter arrived for me. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was of Daniel sitting on a curb, his face hollow, head in his hands. Behind him, a taxi idled. The caption on the back was in his handwriting, "You'll pay for this." I laughed. Then I tore the photo and threw the pieces into the trash. There was nothing there worth keeping. The threat was old and tired. It had no teeth. The months after the trial moved fast. Creditors called Daniel. Investigators reviewed his files. His accounts were frozen while auditors dug through statements. One by one, the lies he had lived on were dismantled. His new girlfriend sold her car and disappeared into a city that did not know him. Friends who once ate at his table now spoke in low tones and avoided his name. Meanwhile, my life grew steadier. My businesses continued to run. Tenants paid rent on time. My investments matured. I did not gloat out loud. I did not stage triumphant posts or flashy celebrations. I worked. I lived. I bought flowers for myself on a Tuesday because nobody told me I couldn't. Then there was the day Daniel came to our old house. He had been released on bail, hair shorter, face thinner. He stood on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking small in the place he once owned in his mind. He knocked. I opened the door. "You can't live here," he said. His voice trembled, but still he tried to be the loud man he had been. "I never asked to," I answered simply. His eyes darted around the living room like a thief in daylight. "Please," he said suddenly, dropping to his knees, the final act of a man who had tried everything else. "I need help. I made mistakes. I can fix things. There was an old part of me that might have helped him. That part died the night he mocked my name in front of friends. This new me had no time for his pleas. I tapped my phone. I had already arranged for a few things. I handed him an envelope. Inside was a document showing that his name had been removed from the mortgage months ago. The house had been transferred in a legal way he could not undo. Properly done, quietly done, with every letter stamped and recorded. I had never wanted the house to be his in the first place. He had thought it was his trophy. I had known all along it would be my safe place. He looked up, eyes wet. "Why?" he whispered. "Because I built it," I said. "Because I paid for it in the end. Because while you were busy laughing, I was working." He tried to argue. He begged. He promised restitution. He promised to disappear. He promised to never speak of me again. I only shook my head. When he left, he walked out small and alone. No camera followed him. No crowd watched. The world had moved on. He had nothing but the echo of his own choices. There was one last thing I wanted him to remember. I mailed a notice to the company where he had used to brag. In it, I attached proof of his misdeeds and a short line. "You taught me to be invisible. I learned how to be visible. Good luck finding the man who made you feel so big." I never waited to see what they would do. I didn't need the final image of his fall. The law would finish what I had started. The rest was fate. Months later, I sat in a small cafe, watching people move through the rain. A woman at the next table laughed, her hair pulled back, her hands full of grocery bags. A child chased a pigeon outside. The world was ordinary and kind in its small ways. I felt the old shame and the new peace. Revenge had not made me whole. It had made me free. I had my money. I had my life. I had my voice. And there was one last private pleasure. I had kept one small thing Daniel had once prized, his watch. I had it cleaned and kept it like a relic. One afternoon, I sold it at an auction quietly, and I gave the money to the shelter down the street. They used it to fix the roof where people slept safe and dry. That was my last act. Not to humiliate him more. Not to show off. But to turn a symbol of his arrogance into shelter for people who needed it. To make something good out of his cruelty. I never saw Daniel again after that. Sometimes I heard rumors. He moved towns, worked odd jobs, slept on couches, tried to patch a life back together from the pieces he had left behind. I hope he learned. I doubt it. Some men never do. On a bright morning months later, I signed my name on another little paper. This one closed the chapter fully. No court. No audience. Just a final line that said it was over. I folded the paper, put it in a drawer, and walked outside. The sun was warm. A breeze moved through the trees. I breathed in the air like it was victory. He had laughed while signing our divorce. He had thought he won. He had been wrong. I smiled once, small and private, and then I opened my door and went back to my life. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.